Look underneath most ships and you'll find a bare propeller, blades spinning freely in open water, nothing around them at all, nothing to slow them down. That's normal. That's what almost every propeller in the world looks like. But every so often, usually under a tugboat or one of those blunt little offshore vessels, there's a propeller sitting inside a ring instead, a solid metal band wrapped snugly around the blades with barely a gap between them. It looks like a cage, something bolted on afterward to stop the blades hitting a dock piling or a stray rope drifting past in murky, dark harbor water. That's a perfectly reasonable guess, the kind almost anyone standing there would make. It's also almost completely wrong. Let's get into it right here on Small Things. A small boat with an enormous job. Picture a tugboat pulled up against the side of a fully loaded supertanker, a ship that might weigh somewhere around 100,000 tons. The tug is a fraction of that size, and yet it's expected to push that tanker sideways, hold it steady against a current, or drag it slowly into a berth, all while barely moving itself. That's the entire job, really. Not speed or covering distance, just raw, sustained force delivered at almost 0 knots, hour after hour if the job demands it. And because the tug works in a harbor, in shallow water, close to docks and hulls, there's a hard limit on how big its propeller is even allowed to be. A small propeller, asked to produce enormous thrust, working about as hard as any propeller can work. An accident involving a canal bank. It did not begin with anyone trying to make a tugboat pull harder. It began with a completely different, much less glamorous problem. In the early 1930s, a German engineer named Ludwig Kort was asked to solve a completely different kind of problem. Propeller wash from boats moving slowly through narrow canals was tearing away at the banks and beds over time, and German transport authorities wanted some kind of guard fitted around propellers to contain the damage before it got worse. A simple flat ring would have done that basic job well enough. Kort didn't build a simple flat ring, though. He shaped his guard with a curved cross-section instead, more like a stubby wing wrapped into a circle than a plain metal tube, mostly because that particular shape controlled the water flow more predictably around the blades. Then something happened that nobody on the project had actually been looking for. Boats fitted with Kort's curved guard weren't just churning up noticeably less mud along the banks. They were pulling considerably harder than boats without it. For the exact same engine, the exact same propeller, nothing else changed at all. That wasn't supposed to happen. A guard is supposed to sit there quietly and protect things, not add power to the whole system. Kort kept testing it, refining the shape carefully, and confirmed the same result again and again in trial after trial. The ring itself was somehow contributing real thrust, not just containing wash. He patented the design in the mid-1930s, and it eventually took his own name for good. What started as a fix for eroding canal banks somewhere in Germany became standard equipment on tugboats all around the entire world, for a reason nobody involved had originally set out to find at all. The design spread outward on its own after that. Kort licensed it to shipyards across Europe, and by the middle of the century, builders with no connection to him at all were producing their own versions of the shape. Crews eventually stopped distinguishing between them altogether. Any propeller running inside a duct became a Kort nozzle, whoever had actually welded the thing together, and the name ended up outliving the Canal project that produced it by decades. A wing bent into a circle! So what was actually happening inside that curved ring to make boats pull harder? Start with what a bare, open propeller quietly loses every time it turns. A propeller blade works something like a wing. As it spins, one face pushes water backward under high pressure, while the other face pulls water in under low pressure, And that difference between the two is what actually drives the boat forward. But right at the very tip of each blade, that high-pressure water doesn't just stay put where it belongs. It curls around the edge instead, spilling toward the low-pressure side, spinning off into little vortices with every single rotation. The same kind of miniature whirlpool you'd see trailing behind a spoon dragged slowly through a cup of tea. Every one of those vortices is wasted energy, force that should have gone into pushing the boat forward and went into spinning water in a useless little circle instead. The harder a propeller works, which is exactly the situation a tug lives in constantly, the worse this particular problem gets. Here's where the ring actually earns its keep, and it isn't only by blocking that leak at the blade tip. Slice the ring cleanly in half and look at its cross-section, and you won't find a flat tube at all. You'll find something shaped almost exactly like an aircraft wing, curved on one face, noticeably flatter on the other. A wing generates lift precisely because that curved shape makes water, or air, circulate around it in a way that creates lower pressure on one side than the other, and the wing gets pulled toward that low pressure side as a result. The Kort nozzle does the exact same trick, just turned sideways to face the water instead of the sky. Water flowing steadily through the ring circulates around that curved inner surface, creating lower pressure on the inside than the outside, and the whole ring gets pulled forward toward the front of the boat, all on its own. It isn't just shielding the propeller anymore at that point. It's quietly generating real thrust of its own, right alongside it every second the engine runs. Not any ring, and not every ship. It's tempting to picture the ring as something generating thrust entirely on its own, independent of the propeller sitting quietly inside it. That's not quite right. Drop the same ring into still water with nothing spinning inside it, and it produces nothing at all, no pull in any direction whatsoever. It only starts working because the propeller is already dragging water steadily through it, giving the ring something to actually shape in the first place. The ring isn't manufacturing thrust out of nothing the way an engine does. It's reshaping motion the propeller already created and turning a meaningful share of that motion into extra pull it wouldn't otherwise have delivered on its own. It's also easy to assume that if this trick works so well for tugs, every single ship out there should probably be using one too. They don't, and for good reason. The ring's advantage only shows up under a very specific combination of conditions at once. Heavy load, low speed. Push a vessel fast enough through open water, and the drag created by that same ring starts costing more than the extra thrust it actually provides in return. Past a certain speed, which varies by vessel, an open propeller simply wins outright, no contest. That's exactly why a bulk carrier or a tanker crossing open ocean at speed runs a completely bare propeller, no ring anywhere in sight, while a tug straining against a dead stop in a harbor keeps every bit of help it can possibly get. The same ring, different water. A tug sits tethered to a shore bollard for its annual certification trial. A load cell spliced into the tow line while the engine winds all the way up to maximum, and a surveyor standing on the dock watches the number climb and settle. That figure, its bollard pull, goes straight into the charter paperwork and decides which jobs the boat is allowed to accept at all for the next 12 months. An offshore support vessel holds its exact position beside a towering drilling platform out in rough, churning seas under a heavy gray sky, engines groaning steadily under the constant strain of it all, hour after hour, without any real pause, its ducted propellers making tiny, constant adjustments. Most of the crew on deck never even notices happening quietly beneath their own feet. A trawler works a fishing ground off Iceland with the net streaming out behind it along the seabed, winches holding steady tension on the warps as the boat crawls forward at barely 3 knots, its ducted propeller loaded about as hard as a harbor tug's, except the resistance dragging behind it is a net and a mile of wire instead of a ship. A welder in a busy, noisy shipyard checks the curved cross-section of a half-finished nozzle ring carefully against a metal template, sparks still cooling slowly on the concrete floor nearby, making absolutely sure that specific airfoil shape comes out exactly right before the ring ever touches open water for the very first time in its life. Built for one job, not every job. That ring around a tugboat's propeller was never simply there to protect the blades. It's a carefully shaped nozzle, and it does 3 things at once. It controls the water moving through it, it reduces the energy a bare propeller would otherwise waste, and under the right conditions, it generates a real share of the thrust entirely on its own. But that only holds inside the narrow band it was shaped for, and a tugboat spends its whole working life inside that band. It isn't a universally better propeller design at all. It's a solution built carefully around one very specific job, and it happens to be extremely good at that one job. Next time you spot that ring under a tug, you'll know it isn't a cage. It's a second engine, quietly working, that nobody was even trying to invent. If this changed the way you look at a tugboat the next time you see one working hard in a harbor somewhere, let us know in the comments below what you want us to explore next in a future video. We might make it our next episode. Thanks for watching. History often hides in the smallest details.